Hi, everyone. This is Karina Rosella from Rise Up Good Witch, and I wanted to make a video today about something that I'm really passionate about, which is eco and collective grief. A big thing that a lot of us are going through in this year, since we are in the year of the United States Pluto Return. Something that I find notable about this time is that on May 10th of last month, Jupiter moved from Pisces into Aries. So that restarts the zodiac wheel in the first house. Once again, we think of Aries as initiative, drive, aggression in a lot of ways, like in its least evolved. But Jupiter in Pisces was represented or is represented by the Nine of Cups, which is called the wish card. Whenever I see this in a spread, whenever it comes up in a reading, it really feels like a vote of confidence. It feels like some good luck is coming for the querent. Jupiter in Aries does not have its own card, but I did choose Temperance because this is a card that is associated with Jupiter in general. So what I feel about this, is that there is kind of like this big disruptor energy, this energy of wanting to change things for the better, and all of us really having to come together to support one another. As many folks probably know, they say we're going into an economic recession. I am of the belief that we are already in the recession because of all the businesses that are suffering, the small businesses, I should say, not the corporations. And this is an issue I think is important to me as a small business owner, but it's also because I'm an anti-capitalist. And how do those things coexist, you might ask? Karina, how is it that someone who's anti-capitalist can be a business owner? Well, the answer is that we all live in capitalism. We have to make capitalism work for us. And for me, being a small business owner feels like harm reduction in that aspect, because while I could have a well-paying 9-to-5 job and then after work go out, organize in my communities, give a portion of my profits to mutual aid, etc., being able to work for myself allows me to not hide the fact that I have a lot of leftist views. And I integrate those leftist views and an anti-oppression framework, a trauma-informed framework in my work in divination. And that's really important to me. So I was just thinking about this in terms of eco grief, because again, we are in this time, we have already begun mass extinction. This is really scary, this is really frightening, and yet it is our reality. This is very much the reality of what we're going through. And how do we cope with this? One way that I've been coping is just thinking about food systems, learning how to garden, and having a better sense of what my capacity is personally. So while gas prices are soaring, I think this is an invitation to look at alternative means of getting around. And of course, like if you live in an area where you don't have a car, and you have to take the bus and you have to ride a bike, that's from a position of privilege, which I'm speaking from, because I do have a van. My van is not super fuel efficient. It's pretty fuel efficient, like for its size. But it does cost a lot of money for me to go on like a day trip now. And I've tried to reduce that part of my carbon footprint out of necessity as a person who is pretty working class, who is not making like a ton of money, and who has been really affected by rising gas prices. So what I'm trying to do is look at sort of our losses as opportunities. And again, I don't want to like love and light that away. It's just sort of like we have to look at the tools that we have and what we can make of things. So Jupiter in Aries, Jupiter is expansion and Aries is drive, to put it like very, very simplistically. So what I feel about that is like, how are we going to move forward? We are in the year of the United States Pluto return. It was I believe February 22nd when we hit the pinnacle of that, and then Pluto is now retrograding back and it will hit the pinnacle once again July 28th. So then we move back towards that exact degree of the US Pluto return. And again, when a nation state goes through a Pluto return, because a human will never go through a Pluto return, what we have to think about that is how it really is the death rebirth cycle of the so-called United States, which is a country that was built on stolen land and was built by enslaved people who were stolen from their homelands. And we can't not acknowledge that, the way that we see things playing out in our world right now climate change deniers, people who are pro-prison, pro-police, people that are anti-trans, the movement against critical race studies and critical race theory taught in elementary school and even college. Like, these are signs of a dying nation. You know, these are signs of the oligarchy, like the old world, white supremacist, patriarchal way of thinking, trying so hard to fight against this change. And what's going to happen? You know, my prediction would be that, you know, we are moving towards eventually civil disruption, like a massive, like, civil rupture that could even be a war, because we have these two sides that are unwilling to back down. And as a leftist, I am also unwilling to back down, because I think that believing in something greater and fighting for that is our only saving grace in a time where we have already begun the sixth mass extinction. And I'm not saying that to freak anyone out. I'm saying it because it's very, very true. It's very much a reality of what is happening in our world. So what I want to do here is pull a card. I'm going to go ahead and pull an oracle card to start. And this is from the Road to Nowhere Oracle by Mary Evans. And I don't know if you can see this, but it says ships. So we think about movement at sea. And the thing about that, the image of ships, is it feels a whole lot like traveling through water. So what's traveling through water? I think of moonstone. So like moonstone, if you work with that gemstone, we think about protection over water. And then I also think about the Six of Swords. So it's interesting, maybe that will come up. Also, when we think of ships, we think about changing relationship with water. So I think about this a lot as someone that lives in Southern California. Many people, you know, if you are one of the 40 million people that lives in Southern California, we depend on the Colorado River. And the Colorado River and all reservoirs surrounding have been extremely depleted over the last years. In fact, I learned recently that one of my favorite spots, because I live in the Mojave Desert, we don't have a lot of water. One of my favorite spots to go to, the closest to a river, is the Whitewater Reserve, which is about 30 to 40 minutes from where I live in Yucca Valley, California. And this year there was no river at all. And that was heartbreaking. And then I learned that the only reason previous years there's been a river is because that water was shipped from the Colorado River. So now what's happening, because of colonization, because of everything that is happening with our land and with like climate deniers and with people who are so focused on development, like urban development and tourism development, and how ecotourism has just become like a catchphrase, and, you know, greening things has just become sort of like a performative action that a lot of bigger businesses are taking. We see like this really harmful redistribution of resources in order to create enjoyment, not even safety, not even health, but enjoyment and entertainment for the 1%, essentially. I think of this with golf courses. So I think about water a lot. I'm in the process of setting up, you know, or I'm hoping to be in the process of setting up like a gray water system. I already have a little bit of a gray water system for my garden, but I eventually am hoping to turn my house, if I have the opportunity to own it, into being fully solar operating and fully gray water. And there are ways to do that, but I'm thinking, you know, like all of us can think about doing this if we have the resources, if we have the time, if we have the energy. And of course, these things take money. In late capitalism, we're seeing like a decrease in affordable housing. We're seeing a decrease in living wage jobs, and that's because of inflation is not catching up to that. Inflation is not catching up to what people need to make in order to survive in this world. So I am coming from a place of privilege when I say that about gray water systems, but that is something that I would like to continue to research and share with other people. So with eco grief, you know, what we have to come to terms with is our own lack of control. You know, we can do things like drive less, we can eat locally sourced organic foods, we can eat less factory farmed meat, if that's something that's accessible to us. We can utilize less trash. We can dry, you know, there's so many things that we can do on an individual level. We can use less electricity, you know, there's many things. And, you know, if you have other things that you think have like been really helpful in reducing your carbon footprint or your the footprint of your influence on the planet, please drop them in the comments. I would love to hear about this. So that's one part of like, mitigating feelings of ego grief. But the reality is that a lot of this is out of our control. I learned a couple weeks ago that fracking for oil uses, like, to drill one single well can take up to 10 million gallons of water. In a time where climate scientists predict that we will run out of groundwater in 2040, this is obviously something to be concerned about. So we don't have a lot of control over fracking. We don't have a lot of control over rich people on their golf courses, over massive amounts of water waste, over the building of ecosystem destroying dams and reservoirs. We don't have control over that. But what we have to do is cope with this and believe in something better, because having a doom and gloom perspective, which y'all, that was hard. I have had that too. I'm really working on trying to do that. I think that like Jupiter and Pisces is really about luck, about dreaming, about expansion, about connection. Whereas Jupiter and Aries can be like taking that dreaming and bringing it into the real world, like helping us figure out how it is that we're going to make these things happen for us. So I want to go ahead and pull 2 cards today. And this is going to be about working with ego grief during the United States Pluto return. Okay, this is interesting. So I'll get up so people can see it. I have these 2 cards crossed over one another. The card on the bottom is the 2 of Swords. The card on the top is the Wheel of Fortune. So the reason I like to pull 2 cards like this is I like to think about, some people do like 3 cards in a row, and that's great and fine. But for me, I don't like doing like future predictions because I don't believe the future has been written. By the way, this is Desert Illuminations Tarot deck. It's based on the Southwest, iconography of the Southwest. So when we think of the Wheel of Fortune, I always tell my tarot students, the Wheel of Fortune is, to me, representative of like, fuck you, none of this matters. Excuse my language. It's really like the fuck it all. It doesn't matter. Like fate will have its way with us. And I think that makes a lot of sense because with the Wheel of Fortune, we don't, right? But then at the same time, we get a chance to make our impact. We can make an impact on our communities. We can reach out and work with our communities in new and innovative ways. But the thing is, the fact that the Wheel of Fortune is crossed with the 2 of Swords, to me, indicates that there's some feeling of lack of control. There's a lack of control. And again, because so many working class people are struggling hand to mouth, paycheck to paycheck, losing their housing, losing their jobs, we don't have as much room oftentimes. Like I am coming from a place of privilege to talk about possibly making my house completely gray water. Not everyone has the access to do that. And that is very much a plan of the state, right? Like that is a plan of the state. Like I do think in a lot of ways, the card, the 2 of Swords, is sort of like the energy of like what the state, like wants us to believe. And that's that we are powerless. And, as they do all these things, as our so-called Democratic president decides to fund police even more, is not doing anything to change ICE or ICE detention centers. And we are looking at the very, very real possibility of many states losing abortion rights. These are devastating times, and we're seeing ourselves, along with inflation, losing more and more control. So what can we do? Because they would not be repressing us if they weren't worried that we weren't catching on to their game and that we wouldn't rise up. Just like in the George Floyd uprising of 2020, when so many people were getting unemployment, they were able to go out in the streets to protest police violence, because police violence, as the documentary 13th by Ava DuVernay states, like police violence in prisons, they're just an extension of Jim Crow. They're just an extension of the history of racism that this country has had. This is just a new way that they are doing it. So when I see 2 of Swords, I do think about like feeling hopeless and feeling like you don't have any control in government and state repression. With Wheel of Fortune there as well, again, it isn't always in our control. Maybe this isn't the most hopeful reading, but the thing is, what if we take back that wheel? We could take back that wheel and we could organize in our communities. And one thing I think needs to happen is creating more spaces that are outside the status quo, move more towards like, and as a queer person, I think this has been happening for a long time. We can't live in individuality anymore. We can't only think about our needs. We can't only think about our family, our blood family and how we take care of them. We have to think collectively if we want to move forward. So I do think like that Wheel of Fortune, in one hand, like I said, it's like the fuck you, none of this matters card. And then on the other hand, really the Wheel of Fortune is like, how are you going to spin your luck in these times? So I hope this reading was helpful to you. Let me know in the comments. I also wanted to let everybody know a couple of things. So I just came out with this new potion. It's called Good Grief. It's made with peaches, honey, brandy, and then rose, hawthorn berry or hawthorn leaf and flower, linden flower, and peach leaf. And it's really delicious. And I made this specifically for eco grief, for dealing with eco grief and for transforming it within ourselves. So you can check that out. You can also, I'm teaching a class in 1 week, June 12th, with the amazing tarot reader and writer, Sanyu Estelle. That is open for registration. I'll have a link in the notes. And then I also have my offering Tarot School for Liberation. If you're interested in learning how to read tarot, especially from a radical social justice, trauma-informed, liberatory perspective, you can check out that class. It'll be open through the end of September. When afterwards, I'm going to be reworking it and re-offering something in 2023. So thanks everybody for watching. See you next time.